Thank you for the introduction, Jerry. Yes, and we have already in the system many different messages. And for my demonstration, I want to focus on this one, which is the purchase order sent by the by your customer and received by the vendor in the system. And for that, what we do, we have two systems. On one side, we have the customer, and that customer will create a purchase order in the system that will be transferred to Flow, and from Flow it will be transferred to the supplier, and in the supplier it will become a sales order. So let me take you through this process in the system. I have here my customer screen, and the customer and vendor are both actually in Dynamics 365, and this is my customer. And in my customer I have several purchase orders, and I already prepared one. And in my customer screen, I have an order, which is not this one. I thought I had a different order. I'm sorry about that, but let's create a new one. I will add a line, and I have an item M001 918, and I have my item M002. And I have a delivery date, which I want to do actually yesterday. I want to have this delivered, and I can confirm this order. Now, the interesting part is you saw me acting now as a purchasing person. And a purchasing person just does follow this process. He doesn't do anything more, but in the background, and that's a nice thing, is that the gears are rolling and automatically the system knows for this vendor actually, we have EDI set up in place, and that's the EDI studio. And now in the background, automatically the system figure out, okay, this is an EDI vendor. I have here those two products, and I can send them out through EDI. And that's actually this process. This process will happen, and that is the EDI studio taking care of that. I created a purchase order as a procurement person. I will confirm the order in the system, and in the background, the XML message is sent in this example, and it is sent to the Flow platform. Now let's take a look at the Flow platform, and then Guy will tell a lot more about the Flow platform, but it will show here that Flow platform. And if I take a look at my document tracking, then you have in a moment a lot of information where you can go through, and all the different forms here that you see Guy will take you through them. I can select today, and in today you see just now I'm on Eastern time zone. You'll see at 11:24 something that an order came in and it was processed nicely, and that order is now sent, when it's processed, sent in the correct format to the supplier. Now, how that is handled is, I will describe that again. That is this process step. So a seller, in this case, sends it, will receive an order, and it will end up first in something that we call a journal. That is a process that we set up. We can also directly go, but in this case, we go via a journal. And in that journal, we validate the data that is coming in to the master data that is living in Dynamics 365. So it will check if an item is stopped or if an item even exists. It will accept everything, but then checks are being done and can be handled by a salesperson on that supplier side. So they can take a look at that information coming in, and if everything is okay, of course, it can be processed. If nothing okay, they can do the adjustments that they want to do. So let's take a look there. I will be going to the supplier. In this case, it's also in Dynamics 365 then, and this is the supplier, and the salesperson can open the sales order staging area. One thing to remember, the purchase order that I created, it was on the distaff page, is the number 340. So, and on the supplier side, if I take a look at this order, this is also the order 340. That's my customer acquisition. So you see, this is the same order, only you noticed it probably already, there was a cross here and it is rejected. That rejection has to do with different things. And as a salesperson, I can take a look at what the problems are in the order. So I press validation errors, and there you see the requested receipt date is in the past. Remember, I changed that, but also an item is non-existing. This I can start solving quite easily to reject this order, or of course I can have a communication with the customer saying, okay, what was it about? And then I can edit the order. I can edit the delivery date, which is now on requested delivery date is on Friday last week. And this customer says, oh, I'm sorry, I actually meant February 12th. So I can adjust that. And on the lines, I tell him, okay, there is an item number that you sent and we don't recognize that. And then the customer says, oh, okay, sorry, that was my bad. It has to be the M001, the wiring harness. So I can adjust this in this system, but still original information will remain existing, of course, in this order. And if I now validate, again, as a salesperson, then you see this one is approved, that one is approved. And if I go to my validation errors, everything is solved. So now I can approve this order. And it's now gone. And the filter says, the journal says it's now approved. It's not visible anymore because there's a filter here that only shows me all the orders that had an error. If I still want to see that order, then you go down and you can open it here. And what you also will notice is that the status is now in process. That means after approval, automatically the sales order will be created. And that's now happened. And you see that the sales order nicely is created. So a salesperson only needs to take care of the problems, and if they're done, approved, then the sales order will be there. This was the part of the business user, and you see everything happens in the background, and the user has a nice, in the foreground, an interface that he can work with, he or she can work with. For the IT department, it's a little bit different sometimes because there could be some problems that arise, and for that we have a different dashboard, and this is this workspace. And in this workspace, it starts with the history errors and all the errors that happened in the last 7 days. And in these summer arrows, I have also history on all the integrations that I have. In this case, they're all EDI, but can also be the integrations that I have. What Jerry will explain a little bit more about later about integration that can happen in the business integration solutions, like web service errors. But an IT person can analyze this, press this, you can see the problem and solve this if required. If there is an error, the IT person don't only need to go to this screen, you can also receive an error message from a business event, an alert or a direct email, and then you can be triggered to go and open this and investigate what was wrong. I'd like now to hand over to Guy, who will show us a little bit more about the IT experience and information that you get from Flow by TIE Kinetix.
So what we're going to see is a little bit more of the technical perspective, but from our customer perspective, what they would come in and have access to. So for most customers, that's going to be primarily coming in to check document tracking. So when they log into the portal, we've got this basic landing page. We can push out news and information about upcoming events or system maintenance, things like that. But for customers, when they want to come in here to track down documents, whether that's I want to see, I've received an email, there was an error on an inbound order, or I want to see how many orders I received last week, or did this invoice 1234 go last Tuesday, things like that. We can come in through the tracking mechanism and look up all that sort of information. So when we get to the tracking piece here, we've got these different tiles. These are some default queries that are configured within the system. So we can see documents that are in error over different time periods or things that we've received over different time periods. So if we come into this and just look at whatever particular basic information we want to see, we can see in the last 30 days, 963 documents. We see all sorts of different document formats here. So in our default views of those tracking tiles, we're able to come in and see basically top to down all the different messages that have been processed. There's quite a bit of information across this different grids here, so we can turn on or off different pieces that we may or may not want to see. But from a high level perspective, we've got our different document numbers, our different document formats. So if you think back to some of the slides that we saw earlier, where on the left-hand side, we see all the different mechanisms for sending data through flow into D365. So if this is a traditional EDI partner that we're receiving in an ANSI order or an EDIFACT order, or this is a PDF to flow customer where we're receiving in a PDF file and extracting the information to then integrate into D365, or we'll also see an example of a smaller, whether it's a customer or supplier or whatever it may be, to go through the web to flow mechanism to be able to actually go to the portal, enter in an order or whatever message you want to do, which would then again from our customer's perspective here, come in and integrate into D365 the same way, regardless of what that input is. So across the different messages we see here, we can be different formats that we have for that. We can always come in and choose any of these individual messages. We can view the original data as it was sent. So if this is an EDI message, we can see that information here. We can see the raw data. We can see it in a report format, which is going to basically extend out sort of all the definitions of all the EDI codes for people that aren't as familiar looking at EDI. We can always download these. We can print them. We can save things off locally. So the portal here is going to keep all of our historical information, but then we can save local copies of things if we needed to. We can also come in, other than the basic queries where we're seeing those default tiles for some basic sort of filters, we can come in and set up searches for many different parameters here, depending on what it is we may be looking for. So again, from the EDI world, that might be an acknowledgement status, or it might be a certain type of message that we are sending or receiving. We could filter based on whoever the sender or recipient of the message may be. So as our community grows and we're dealing with multiple people sending information through the system, we can filter based on whose data we want to see at a particular time. The tile I clicked through was basically in the last 30 days. We could adjust that, do based on time or date range, whatever we need for that. Filter based on the communication mechanism, so how the data has come into us. Or one of the more popular ones, document level data. So if I wanted to come in and filter based off of a document number, whether that's a purchase order number, invoice number, shipment number, things like that, we can set up whatever criteria is to build these filters and queries based on what we may be looking for. Now, we can always come in and do this ad hoc and build these queries and look up information based on whatever we're looking for, but we can also save these. And what that'll do is that'll put back on that main tracking screen, the different tiles that we saw, they'll show up there as queries and tiles that then we can quickly access and get to without having to build our queries over and over again. We're also able to, from whatever the result pane is here that we're looking at, we can obviously come through, view them as we saw that, see rows of them, individual messages off locally if you wanted to have a copy of that, but also this result set of whatever queries we're looking at. So you've always got access to the information. We also have an analytics piece built in that's going to take a higher level look at this information. So for this customer, we can see the queries, we can get results, we can say how many orders yesterday, things like that. But we can also, in addition to saving that off locally and creating their own reports, we've got some standard reports in here to show some analytics about data going through the system. So in my demo system here, we've got quite a bit of information, but basically we're filtering on the last month, all partners. We can see 3,000 partners set up in the system. Number of documents were up a little bit from the prior month. Most common document types, a little bit of a history over time of what that looks like. We've also got other pre-configured reports. We've got one that goes into a little bit more detail, so different things that we can represent in this analytics report. So this is the last week. I could filter by type or document number, again, partner status. So in the last week, our volume has gone down a little bit. Still very few errors, but that's also gone down a bit, and get more information about those. And from the EDI world, we've got this idea of acknowledgements to control the receipt of messages going inbound and outbound between partners, so we can come in and see the acknowledgement reconciliation for that as well. So in addition to having access to information to view either online or download things offline, we've also got these analytics to give some different reports and visibility to information in the system. Now, if we want to talk about the different ways, we said different ways to feed information into 65, or obviously on the as well, we can see that through the tracking here. But if we want to see an example of what a smaller customer may see, if we switch over to a different environment here and we log in for a smaller customer here that we wanted to give access to do a web to flow type model where they're going to be able to log in to the portal, get a different view of the information. And what they're going to see really is in this document manager piece, we can give them the ability to create documents, key them into the portal here. That will then behind the scenes create the message that will then be passed off to D365. So we can come in new document. We've got our basically, I can click OK, and that's going to give them a simple screen in this case, but we could put whatever sort of information in there that we want to define the, in this case, order that's going to be entered to then be sent off to through flow into the customer's D365 system. Send that out, they can save a draft of it, they can create a PDF. So that information can be entered. We're also going to have visibility of the different messages that may have gone back and forth historically as well. So they can see prior orders that have gone out, they could see invoices that have come back, whatever that may be. Obviously, this is all queryable and filterable like we saw from the document tracking screen as well. So there's ability to take this information and collect it, whether it's traditional bigger partners that are doing EDI or some sort of defined format, maybe it's XML, or it's reading information from a PDF to integrate through flow into D365, or in the web to flow model where we can give them the capability here to actually enter in information to then also feed into D365. So that's our concept of 100% digitalization, where we want to be able to capture all of this information and get it integrated in a same common way so that different integrations don't have to be built for different business scenarios in that example.